It is 1983. The Cold War is at its peak. Soviet missiles are pointed at every major American city. American missiles are pointed right back. For 40 years, both sides have played a game of nuclear chicken, each one daring the other to blink. But what if the Soviet Union decided to stop playing games? What if instead of threatening, they actually did it? What if the Red Army launched a full-scale conventional invasion of the United States of America? Not a nuclear strike. Not a proxy war. A real, boots-on-the-ground invasion of the most powerful country on Earth. In September 1983, the Soviet Union shot down Korean Airlines Flight 7, killing 269 civilians. 2 months later, NATO ran a military exercise called Able Archer 83 that was so realistic the Soviets genuinely believed it was cover for a first strike. Soviet nuclear forces went to their highest alert level. The world came closer to nuclear war than at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis. In this timeline, the paranoia tips over the edge. The Soviet leadership, convinced that America is about to strike first, decides to act. But instead of launching nuclear missiles, which would guarantee mutual destruction, they choose a different path. A massive conventional invasion. The invasion starts where geography makes it possible. Alaska. The Bering Strait is only 55 miles wide. Soviet forces could cross it in hours. The initial assault would target the Aleutian Islands and the western coast of Alaska, establishing beachheads before American forces could fully mobilize. In 1983, Alaska had minimal military infrastructure. A few Air Force bases, some early warning radar stations, and a small Army garrison. Against a full Soviet invasion force of hundreds of thousands of troops, it would be overwhelmed in days. The Soviets would have a foothold on American soil, and the entire world would hold its breath. The moment Soviet boots touch American soil, something happens that no invader has ever faced. 300 million Americans get angry, all at once. Within hours, every military base in the country goes to full alert. The National Guard mobilizes in all 50 states. Recruitment offices are overwhelmed with volunteers. Factories that build cars start building tanks. The American industrial machine, the same machine that built more ships in World War II than every other country combined, shifts to wartime production overnight. And then there is the part the Soviets did not plan for. American civilians are armed. Over 200 million firearms in private hands. Every town, every neighborhood, every farmhouse becomes a potential ambush point. This is not Europe. This is a country where the population shoots back. Here is the scenario that keeps every military strategist awake at night. How do you fight a conventional war against a nuclear power without it going nuclear? The answer is you probably cannot. Every Soviet advance on American soil brings them closer to the line where an American president decides conventional defense is failing and reaches for the nuclear option. And the Soviets know this, which means they have their own nuclear weapons on hair-trigger alert. One miscommunication. One panicked general. One radar glitch that looks like a launch, and the entire world ends. The invasion does not just risk American and Soviet lives. It risks everyone, everywhere, for the rest of time. Even if the Soviets took Alaska, holding it would be a logistical nightmare that makes D-Day look like a weekend trip. Every bullet, every meal, every gallon of fuel would have to cross the North Pacific, the most dangerous ocean on Earth. American submarines, the best in the world, would turn those supply lines into graveyards. The U.S. Navy had 15 carrier battle groups in 1983. The Soviets had 2. Within weeks, the Soviet forces in Alaska would be cut off, freezing, starving, and surrounded. Napoleon learned this lesson in Russia. Hitler learned it at Stalingrad. And now the Soviets would learn it in the place they least expected: America. The invasion would not happen in a vacuum. NATO would activate Article 5, the collective defense clause that means an attack on one is an attack on all. British and French naval forces would join the Pacific blockade. West Germany would threaten the Soviet western border, forcing Moscow to keep millions of troops in Europe instead of sending them to America. And then there is China. In 1983, China and the Soviet Union were bitter rivals. A Soviet invasion of America would be China's perfect opportunity to settle old border disputes. The Soviets would not just be fighting America. They would be fighting the entire Western world, with China stabbing them in the back. The invasion would fail. Not in years, in months. The combination of American industrial power, armed citizenry, naval superiority, NATO support, and impossible logistics would grind the Soviet advance to a halt and then push it back into the sea. But the consequences would go far beyond the battlefield. The humiliation of a failed invasion would shatter the myth of Soviet military power. The economic cost would bankrupt an already struggling Soviet economy. Protests would erupt in Moscow, Leningrad, and across the Eastern Bloc. The Berlin Wall would not fall in 1989. It would fall years earlier. The Soviet Union, instead of slowly dissolving, would collapse in spectacular fashion, brought down not by ideology or economics, but by the greatest military miscalculation in human history. Every empire in history has made the same mistake. It looked at a map, saw land it did not control, and convinced itself that military force could change that. It never works. Not permanently. The Soviet Union could not have invaded America any more than America could have invaded the Soviet Union. That is the entire point of the Cold War. Two superpowers, each strong enough to destroy the other, but neither strong enough to conquer the other. And the only thing that kept the world alive for 40 years was the shared understanding that trying would be the last thing either of them ever did.